Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Conservatives Cool Talk Radio. This is your host, Wayne Bradley, and we're on our Fix Michigan Monday segment. I thank everyone that's listening in this evening. We're going to have Sheriff Mike Bouchard as our guest on the show tonight, and I believe that's him calling in.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yes, sir. Mike Bouchard.
Hi, Sheriff. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How are you?
All right. Thank you so much for joining this evening. I know you had a busy week. We tried to get you on last week, but I know how it is on the campaign trail.
It gets a little crazy. I just actually was over in Kalamazoo tonight speaking to a group of business people, so still busy times. I
understand. Since you're the only gubernatorial candidate that's been on the show twice here, so I have to say thank you for that, and I want to know how things been going since the last time we spoke.
Things are great. We're growing. In the last week, we got the Greater Detroit Chamber of Commerce endorsement. We got the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce endorsement, and the week before that, we picked up the Kalamazoo and the Grand Rapids Home Builders endorsement. So it's been a good string.
Excellent. You guys have maintained through the campaign. I've noticed that you guys have run a very clean campaign. Hasn't been anything negative or anything come out of your camp. And I guess that's in contrast to some of the other candidates. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's by design. That's how I like to be. I think people want someone to be positive and upbeat. They want them to be focused on the issues. I want people to hopefully vote for me, not against somebody else. So I better be talking about myself and my plans to give them a reason to vote for me.
Right. Excellent. How did you feel today about today's ruling on Second Amendment rights?
I'm good with that. It's a reaffirmation of what I think is inherent in the Second Amendment, and that is the individual right, not the collective right, and I believe that's important.
Right. And have you, since the last time we talked, have you looked at it more and decided, like, if you were elected governor, what would be some of the things that we can save money on? I noticed that some other people put out different ideas for exactly where we could save money. Have you kind of looked at it and narrowed it down to some different ideas on where we could save this budget in Michigan?
Absolutely. In fact, there's a lot of specifics of my plan and my experience on my website at bouchard4forgovernor.com. Goes into literally where we can save billions of dollars very specifically from the Department of Corrections so that we can keep the corrections officers on the job and keep the bad guys behind bars but still reduce our costs, to where we can squeeze money out of education and focus it on the mission, which is the classrooms, the teachers, technology, smaller class sizes, but do it with the existing money but deliver more to that mission and cut out $250 million is listed in my suggestions there.
With the
there's
Department
a lot
of
of
Corrections,
specifics on there.
I talked with Bill Schuette about that before, too. What do you think, in particular, some of the things we can cut down on the cost per inmate and things of that nature?
Well, I think, as you go through the system, as an example, the current governor is taking prisoners from other states at $10,000 per year less than our per prisoner stated cost. And so, part of it is that they've got a special agreement on health care, and I understand also part of it is that the most labor-intensive point of the Department of Corrections is intake, classification, medical checks, all that. So let's just assume, for argument's sake, we could save half of that and save $5,000 per prisoner per year. That's $250 million.
Okay, yeah, so that's what I'm trying to. Those are the things that I'm looking at and trying to figure out exactly where we can obviously save some money. And
we can save a lot there.
Right, that's a lot of money. As far as the education system, and this is something obviously is a statewide issue, but me being from the Detroit area in particular, what can we do to improve the current educational system and some of the barriers that are in place?
Well, obviously, I think choice helps parents have more opportunity. It also creates the incentive to realize that there's alternatives. Charter schools. I believe that in the worst performing districts in the state, we ought to allow the top performing charter schools to have an unlimited number in those areas, because really those those parents and those children are the ones that are most being punished and at risk by the current system.
Right. Now that to me would sound like definitely a cry for help for Detroit. What are some of your visions, and what are some of the things you think that we can do to improve Detroit? And the other question would be, have you actually talked to the current mayor at all about your vision?
Absolutely. I've actually chatted with him a number of times. I saw him today when I was in Detroit.
Okay.
There's a lot we can do and must do for the city. I mean, Detroit is emblematic of our state. It's on the bleeding edge, not the leading edge, unfortunately, of the state. But the state's in the same situation, so we have to realize that all levels of government are headed in that direction unless we change structurally and systemically. So, one of the best and most important things we have to do is to make sure that the city has the tools and the wherewithal under statutes to change and make some of those tough decisions. Some of those things are lacking right now. And we have to also understand, as a state, there is no more money to give. I was asked a question, would I give money to bail out cities? The problem is, anybody that tells you yes ignores the budget. Right now, the state of Michigan's $2 billion short by a lot of estimates on cash flow, but they're also anywhere from $56 to $63 billion with unfunded health care and retirement liabilities. So on any private sector balance sheet, they're bankrupt. So if anybody's telling you that they're going to add more money to the system, they're not being square with you. They're not looking at the books, and if they think they're going to tax people more in the state, people have less. They have less in their pockets, less in their bank accounts. If they have a job, they have less value in their home. And so we can't expect the remaining people here to have more money to give. We've driven tons of people out, and the ones that are here are hanging on by a thread. So we have to do government better, cheaper, faster.
Right, and you signed Grover Norquist's request that not to raise taxes on the pledge, right?
Absolutely. I was the last one in the race and the first one to sign it.
I understand that. And would you commit to also putting the current the budget, the entire state budget, online for transparency?
Absolutely. In fact, my running mate Terry Lynn Land, she's the only department in the whole state that puts every check, every expenditure online. I'll do that. She'll be actually the one to make that happen in every department as my lieutenant governor.
That definitely makes you feel a lot better about that. The Michigan fair tax, have you reviewed that, and is that something that you would consider at some point, considering the failing, the tax system that we have now?
Well, yeah, I've looked at the fair tax. I mean, the bottom line for me is our tax system has to be lower, and it has to be one that's competitive. So, regardless of what the final structure looks like or what components are in it, the focus must be what makes us competitive with every other state that's in the top, every other country that's in the top, so our businesses can once again grow here. And anything that makes us one of the top states.
Would you be immediately able to get rid of the Michigan business tax? How long would that take to to have that removed?
Well, the first thing that's got to go right away is the surcharge. I mean, that's just punishing on punishment.
Right.
And then the next thing is to do a rewrite of the tax code, one that's, again, competitive, reasonable, low, easy to comply with.
Yeah, a lot of the money that's spent, putting in this tax code is what cost the taxpayer so much money that when I had the fair tax gentleman on, he said if we had a simpler tax code, it would be cheaper to implement. A lot of the money that we waste each year goes into chasing after tax dollars.
Right, and for companies and individuals to file forms and to make compliance.
Right. And, another question, I think since the last time we've been on, the smoking ban went into effect.
Yes.
How do you feel about that, and do you think that's another example of too much government intrusion?
That's way too much. I was asked by a number of reporters on a show, and I told them I would have vetoed it. Not that it's not well-intentioned, and not that I completely dislike smoke. But that's not the point. What I dislike more is a government overreach that steps on your personal freedoms. And one of the foundations of America is property rights, personal property rights. And so even while it's well-intentioned, and even why I can't stand to be around smoke, let alone in a restaurant, I get up and go to another restaurant. But the problem is, with this law, government has banned a legal product, absolutely 100% legal product, from private property. That's when you take it back into the abstract and say what principles are at play here. that's a scary concept, because while we may, like not to be around smoke, what does government say next that they have to keep away from us, even if it's legal?
Right. Now, again, I guess this is a question. Now, as a sheriff, I know how you feel about this. The legalization of medical marijuana, and I've asked every candidate this recently, is how do you feel about the way it's almost like a gray area now with medical marijuana and actually people moving towards legalization all the way around. How would you feel about that as governor of this state?
Well, I think that if you look at a lot of the countries around the world that have complete legalization, some are actually pulling back and going the other direction. Productivity and drug abuse goes up. It may be taxed, it may be regulated, it may have clinics to give people treatment, but nonetheless, right, there's a broader basis of it, and productivity individually goes down. I'm not a big believer in it. People say we'll never win it, but it's like cancer. I don't give up. I think substance abuse of any kind destroys lives, and that's just my belief. Now, having said that, the people voted for medical marijuana. It's the law of the land. I will always adhere to what the people vote for and want and uphold it. But having said that again, I would say and call on the legislature, they need to put in legislative framework to have the regulation and the system and the process clear and obvious. Right now, you've got a number of people that are, I think, doing things that are illegal under the law and pushing the limits, but
that's what I say. It's like a gray area right now.
Right. It wasn't really spelled out, and that's a problem. You need to, one of the most important things about a law is it has to be clear and easy to comply with. So if you do this, it's okay. If you do that, it's not. And with this law, there are some areas where it's not quite so clear.
Yeah, I guess that's where I was trying to figure out how we could more clearly define that, because, like you said, people have voted for it, but maybe there's some framework that could be put in place that could, monitor that situation a lot better.
Right.
What do you think about the governor of Arizona and her stance on the immigration issue, and how will we deal with it here in Michigan?
Well, I think that Arizona and a lot of other states are standing up and saying, look, the federal government's failing on lots of levels, and we're going to do what we have to do to protect our state. And I believe that that's an important statement, and that's the way I would act as governor.
Right. Should we be considered a state that should be very concerned about these border and immigration laws, considering where our location is?
Absolutely. The northern border is twice as long as the southern border and has one half of the agents. We know, I serve on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, we know for a fact that more and more people are sneaking across both the southern and the northern border from countries of interest, meaning terror watch list countries. Right. We know for a fact that the only terrorist with an explosive device on the way to commit a terrorist act was stopped at the northern border. So, absolutely, there's reasons for us to secure the northern border as well, to be aware of that, and to enforce the law.
If with your background, what do you think would be the simplest thing or the first thing they should do in Arizona in particular on protecting our borders here in America?
Well, they've taken one of the steps. I don't think you should mandate state or local authorities to take action, but you should empower them. Meaning that if one of my deputies stops you on the side of the road anywhere, they check everything right down to a parking ticket that's outstanding and can take action. But if they come across you in the ordinary course of their duties, not profiling, not sweeping, not doing any of that, but they just come across you, let's say on a traffic stop.
Right.
And through that traffic stop, it's determined, let's just even go further and say you voluntarily tell them, I'm in the country illegally. There is nothing they can do about it other than refer you to the feds. Call the feds, and most of the time they say document and release them, or tell them to turn himself in, or, it's just, that's the way it happens. And so I think the local and the state ought to be authorized to enforce every statute like every other statute.
Right, because I don't think a lot of people realize that when they're illegal and they tell you that they're illegal, that sometimes, like you said, they write them up and they send them on their way. A lot of people don't understand that, especially if they were either committing a crime or could have been in the process of committing a crime or something of that nature.
Right. We had individuals, 3 high-profile cases in Oakland County where 3 different individuals all were in the country illegally, one from Honduras, one from Mexico, one from Romania, all committed an assortment of different incidents and acts over a period of time, culminating in very, very serious violent acts. The one killed a police officer out by DTE Pine Knob, and literally was trying to flee the scene and was tackled by citizens who held him until the deputies could arrive and take him into custody. Another individual ran into Arts Beats and Eats in Pontiac, ran over a couple, pinned the one young lady against a wall. She lost her legs. Then there was another case that was very, very serious. He had been arrested by us for serious crimes, was deported. Canada gave him asylum. He snuck back in, broke into a house, kidnapped a couple, duct taped them, and was taking them to a remote location to kill them. The common thread in all of these is that each one of the three of these people had multiple contacts with authorities before the very violent act.
So
the one individual actually had 17 prior citations.
Wow. So, I mean, this person, if he was an American citizen, he would be locked up a long time ago.
Right. No question. And that's the craziness is that, you know, all we're saying is enforce the law and enforce it equally. One of the principal tenets of the Constitution is equal protection under the law or equal treatment under the law. If you commit a crime, and sneaking into the country is a crime, and then you commit identity theft, which to get a job you have to because you're using a Social Security number that's not yours, those are two very serious crimes. And yet, you know, oftentimes on a daily basis, it's ignored and a blind eye goes from the federal government. My answer to them is either enforce the law and do your job or repeal it. Have the guts to say we want free and open borders. Anybody can come and go as they please. But, of course, they won't admit that.
They won't admit to that. But that's obviously what they have in mind anyway. As far as being tough on crime, I did not realize this until someone sent me an email and told me that you're the only candidate that supports the death penalty?
Yes.
Okay.
I am.
All right. I did not know that. Is that part of? Do you believe that with the way we do the Department of Corrections right now, would it be better if we could keep more of the violent criminals locked up and some of the non-violent offenders into other kind of programs or something like that? Would that
Absolutely.
be better use of the way we, deal with the Corrections Department?
Absolutely. You know, what the governor's current approach is to try to put people up for parole when they reach their mandatory minimum. And that's the wrong approach. The right approach should be to look at an individual prisoner, the totality of circumstances that put them in prison, their institutional behavior. And based on all of that, if they're nonviolent and not a violent risk, that's the one you want to roll out. So, like, I run one of the largest jails in America. So, I'm a warden. And what I've had to do is to focus resources that are limited in my operations. We've cut almost $20 million in a 3-year roll. Right. And what we did is we cut nonviolent offender programs dramatically. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but, you know, the one thing that you have to do in your private life and the government hasn't done, we've done it, but the state hasn't, is to separate needs from wants. I wanted to have my boot camp and nonviolent offender programs. I need to have violent offenders behind bars. So we closed the boot camp and we put all the nonviolent offenders as best we could out onto tethers and focused the bed space and the deputies in the jail on keeping the violent offenders behind bars.
And the other thing, I guess, like I said, not realizing that, do you think that deters crime, knowing that there's a death penalty in place? Would that
there's different arguments. A lot of people don't believe that there's a deterrent, and I'm not convinced that there is, although there have been a number of cases. I know one case in particular where the one guy kidnapped somebody in one state and drove across the state line to murder them because the state he got into didn't have a death penalty and the one he came from did. So, that was very clear. But I think, more than just a deterrent, our system is founded on justice. And justice is commensurate with a crime. If you, shoplift, it's a light punishment. If you commit an armed robbery, it's a much more severe punishment. If you murder somebody in a heinous way, everything should be commensurate with the crime. And that's why I think some crimes are so heinous that the commensurate punishment with that crime is the death penalty. And the other thing that, I want to point out, almost everyone that is against the death penalty says, well, lock them up for life. They'll never hurt anyone again. Ignores the fact that there are men and women that are working in those prisons, corrections officers, and other inmates that are exposed to that. There is absolutely no deterrence for somebody that has no chance of parole to not kill again. So we had an individual convicted and sentenced to life without parole in prison. While he was in my jail, he attacked one of my deputies and permanently injured, permanently disabled her. But what else are you going to do to him?
Right.
He's already going away for life. So those are the kinds of things that are ignored as well.
Those are some tough decisions. In your first day of being elected governor, what would be the first thing you would do?
You've got to freeze non-essential spending. We're hemorrhaging money at an alarming rate. We have to stop the bleeding. And then you can look for how immediately after that, how you're going to make the patient healthy. But the first thing you have to do is triage the patient, which is to stop the bleeding.
Okay. And would you be in favor of removing I know we were talking about underperforming schools in in certain areas. Would you be in favor of removing caps overall for charter schools?
Well, I think the focus, in anything you've got to have a focus, and you tackle the most pressing problems first. The most pressing problems are the districts that are failing the parents and failing the students. So that's obviously where you try to direct some of the most radical reform, if you will.
Right. And we're trying to bring we want to obviously, the biggest problem in Michigan, most people would agree on, would be jobs.
Right.
And we want to bring new businesses into this state. What are some of the things that we can do to make it more business friendly? And would you consider right to work zones possibly as a governor?
Yeah, I would definitely consider right to work zones. And the thing though that makes it most business friendly is to be competitive on taxes and regulation. Kind of as an analogy, we're a hamburger stand in the state of Michigan, and right now our cost of the hamburger is twice as much, if not more, than other hamburger stands, and the lines are twice as long because of our regulation. So obviously when somebody's looking to buy a hamburger, they say, geez, the prices are high there and the lines are too long. I go elsewhere, and I go to Indiana, and I go to Alabama, and I go to other states, and that's the same analogy. If we bring the cost of our product, the cost of our state, if you will, on those businesses to locate here or to start here and grow here, and the lines are the equivalent of our regulatory process. We've got to streamline those and make them timely, easy to comply with, and scientifically based, not some political agenda.
Well,
then you will have people begin to come to your hamburger stand. The state of Michigan will have customers again.
Well, like I said, a big part of that, the regulation usually comes from a lot of the, maybe the unions and the situations they provide as far as a work scenario. Is it, like I said, how feasible would it be to have maybe right-to-work zones in somewhere in places in Michigan?
Well, I think it's feasible.
If it makes something to get done, how quickly could something like that be put in place?
Yeah, I think it's feasible. I mean, there are some parts of the state that really don't want that and aren't interested in it. There are some parts that feel that very much is part of the equation for a solution and to grow jobs. And I've never been a believer on this or any issue that Washington and Lansing have the only fountain of wisdom, that's flowing. In fact, I think the fountains in Lansing and Washington right now are broken.
Right.
So, I like more self-determination and local control on a lot of issues.
Right. Now, if in this primary we have some great candidates, what would you say is that distinguishes you from the rest of the candidates in this field?
Well, I mean, the number one thing is that for everyone else, this is an abstract thing. For me, it's kind of been there, done that. I was a leader in the Senate in the 90s when we were faced with same and similar problems. In 1991, the slogan was, last one out, turn the lights off. We had $1 billion deficit. We were ranked one of the worst states in America to grow a company. We had to reform welfare, education, and start fixing our roads. As I've said before, it's like Yogi Berra would say, it's deja vu all over again.
Right.
And so I was a leader in the Senate when we did that. And the governor doesn't have a vote and can't introduce a bill. But as a leader, I was one of the people that helped move that process for then Governor Engler, Majority Leader Posthumous. I worked as a leader to get an agenda through and done. And as governor, I know exactly how to do that, what to do, how to do it, and I'm most importantly willing to do it. Because the reason I'm running is I want to keep my kids here, period. I want them to have a chance to stay in the state, and the only way they're going to get that is that if we grow jobs and we change the environment for job providers. I'm willing to do that, even if it makes me unpopular, even if it makes me a one-term governor. Because for me, it's about the next generation, not the next election. And that's what separates me. I know what to do, how to do it, and I'm willing to do it. No one has been a leader in the legislature when it worked. No one has been a CEO of a very large government organization like I have been for over a decade, cut $20 million out of his budget and still provides life-saving services. And I've been a small business owner for 10 years. So I've had all three experience sets. I can sit in that chair in the first hour and know every step that we need to take and where to go if I don't think I've got the answer on that issue.
That's a good answer, very good answer. Can you give everyone that's listening out here your website so if they want to go to it and get all the information about your platform, how to improve Michigan, where they can find it?
Absolutely. Bouchard4governor.com.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. What are some of your next events coming up so if people are listening in, they might be able to catch you? I know you got a busy schedule.
Well, we just did a town hall in Oakland this past weekend. We did one in Macomb. We've done one in Jackson and Grand Rapids and Saginaw. We're moving around and doing town halls as much as we can. We'll be giving some more speeches. We got at least one or two more debates that will be televised. And we put some of those events on our website so people can look there and try to come.
You're going to take the gloves off just for one of these debates? Just give them one good one?
Well, I'm not afraid to punch or take a hit, but again, I'm going to focus on the issues. I don't want to stand up there and throw a rock and talk about each other when we need to be talking about the problems the state's facing. So
I'm just teasing you. I really do respect the way you've run your campaign. Like I said, people should be taking notes on that because again, it's about what you can do and not what the other person can't do. So I really appreciate that. So one more time, give them the website address so they can check that out.
Thanks a lot. Bouchard4governor.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for coming on the show tonight. I really appreciate that. Good luck with the campaign, and we're going to keep following you. Hopefully we can have you on after the primary.
Well, even better, I hope to be on as your governor.
I hope so, too. I look forward to it.
All right, sir. You have a great night.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Bye. That was Mike Bouchard, who is the candidate for governor. And again, that's the one thing that has impressed me watching his campaign is the way they've run it. It's been a very clean campaign, focused on the issues. And I do think it does lend a lot of credibility to the fact that he says he has the most experience from day one walking in, knowing how to deal with the situation. It's going to be a very hotly contested primary here coming up. So again, it'll be interesting to make sure these guys don't bludgeon themselves too much for the actual governor's race here. So I want to thank Mike Bouchard for coming on again. He's obviously been on the show now twice for the Fix Michigan Mondays, and again, I think that again speaks out to the candidate that he is, that he's coming out not only dealing with the major media people, but people like myself that have direct connections to the people. These interviews are again recorded and they go on to the website, and also you can download them to your iPod. So again, I appreciate Sheriff Bouchard for coming on the show tonight. If you have any comments about the interview, give me a call in 347-996-3175. I'm going to be getting off the air soon. Again, this was a great interview with Sheriff Mike Bouchard, who's running for governor in the state of Michigan. Again, he does have the most legislative experience. Mike Cox is the current Attorney General. Pete Hoekstra is a congressman, so he has a lot of, obviously, of experience, but when we're talking state legislative experience, and Tom George, who I'm looking forward to having on the show soon. I was reaching out, hoping to get Tom maybe to come on here this evening, but we're going to schedule that later on. But I want to thank Mike Bouchard and his camp again for coming on the show, explaining his vision on how we can fix Michigan. And again, I think it's a very sharp and good view. I look forward to this primary. Like I said, it's going to be heated. We have a lot of good candidates, and over the next 6 weeks, I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more from all the candidates on their vision on what they believe, why they're the best candidate to fix Michigan. Only people I really feel sorry for is you Democrats out there and your candidates, because they're basically battling for number 2. They're battling for second place. And that's regardless almost of who the candidate is that we put in place, because they're all excellent candidates. So I look forward to having everybody else come back on for their round 2 on Fix Michigan Mondays. If you get a chance, go to the website, conservativescool.com. Look at all the updates and blogging and polling results that we have on there. I'm going to be putting on a poll soon for the gubernatorial candidate here in Michigan. I think I'll be putting that out in the next day or so. I want to start getting people's feedback on there. So if you can, go to conservativescool.com and vote on the poll on who you think has the best vision to fix Michigan. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Again, that's conservativescool.com. Thanks again to Sheriff Mike Bouchard for coming on tonight. Good night, everyone. God bless.